One of the best cures for ignorance is education. A good education really does help out with helping people think through different things and think through their different questions. And yet, this is something that we really struggle with as people. Is education generally means that we are, especially when it's talking about us as human beings, it really is about changing our social norms and changing things and how we actually make decisions or how we decide things. Maybe often it's going to counteract and it's going to impact the way that we've always lived our lives. And for most of us, this is a really scary, tricky thing to deal with. And I want to talk about that today. So if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Massac. I'm Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor for to help you out as much as I possibly can. So there's really only two ways that you can change in this world and change how you're thinking about things. The first way that you can change is through experience. And this is where you actually go and experience things for the first time. You might be exposed to new scenarios, you might be exposed to different people, and that is a great way to learn different things. But there's another way that we that I think is very important, and I do think it's an important way to do, to come up with new ways of thinking, is through education. And education generally is the best way to cure a lot of ignorance in this world. I know that sounds really bad in terms of how I'm saying that, but ignorance in this way that I'm mentioning or I'm perceiving it is just a way of lack of not knowing, right? You have this whole world around us, and education can be a very great way, the sort of traditional education can be a great way to learn different things. But the problem is, and so why is that? What's going on there? Well, with education, it's really a way of looking at the broader of what we've learned, as many different people have learned, and condensing that into something that is manageable and taking somebody along on the journey in terms of learning these interesting things. Now, here's the problem with it, though. Whenever we, especially with something to do with the social sciences or life, it really contradicts. It really is a struggle for most of us to think about some of these things because it's a new way of thinking. It's a different way that we've always done things. And the farther it is away from how we understand the world at this moment, the sort of bigger the leap is, the more uncertainty that we're going into. And then at that moment, you have to do what I call mind flips. This is where you have to think, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, the way that I've been thinking about things has been totally different than the way that I'm thinking about it right now. I'm not to say that it's wrong, but it's different in how I'm thinking about it right now. And when that happens, we have a lot of different emotions that come through. Right, so first of all, it's very hard to learn new things. It always is a struggle. It's cognitively demanding. Your brain is forming all of those different things in your head. I'm not going to go there in terms of how it's forming different things. But then at the same time, and so that is very stressful, right? That consumes a lot of resources. But then once it forms and you can sort of see things happening, then you have to start questioning, oh gosh, the way that I've been doing things, the way that I've been thinking about things is not the way that I'm thinking about it right now. And so what does that mean about my prior self? How am I understanding what I've learned in the past or what I've done in the past? And so some of us will react in a very emotional way where we might be scared or fearful or angry and say that that's not the way that we should be learning about things. That is dangerous to learn about those particular things. But then some of us might be accepting of those things that you're learning and actually have an epiphany and actually change your life and come up with different ways of thinking about things and doing about things. And I would hope that I'm trying to go for the latter, but that is difficult to do for myself and probably difficult for you as well when you're thinking about the way that you're doing things. So, when you're getting an education, no matter what it is and what it looks like, just remember it's going to be a journey. It's going to be very difficult to go through this. And you're going to have a lot of different emotions with it, but you have to roll with the punches when you have those experiences. Know that you're probably going to have some very negative emotions whenever you're learning those things. And you're going to be like, I can't believe this. This is not true. This is all false. But then when you start digging into it, I encourage you at that moment, when you start having those moments like, I don't believe this, kind of dig into it. Take a little bit of a deeper dive and try to think about what is actually going on behind the scenes for why people are actually saying those things. And the more that you do that, you might actually learn something. So, maybe it's something that you disagree with at this moment. Well, take some time and think about why they're actually saying that. Think about who is saying it, what is their stature, what is their profession, what's going on behind why they're actually saying those things, what are their motives for saying those things. I think that's a really important thing that we forget about, is think about why they're saying those things. And the profession that they might be in might be just simply about, hey, we saw a better way of doing these things, why not pursue that? Sometimes people say things because they're motivated for, profit or, power, those kind of things. But often, especially in education, where we have this desire to sort of explore things simply because we want to learn what is the best way to do things, maybe explore those things, what people are saying, and question what you've thought in the past. I know it's not easy for everybody to have those emotions, or it's not easy to learn things. It never is. But think about, okay, this person that I'm learning something from, why are they saying that? Is it because that they are trying to teach me something that's dangerous? Or is it simply because we're trying to open up and think in different ways? And I think if you can get to the moment where you realize that education is just getting you to think in different ways and getting different insight, rather than thinking of it as like this sort of dangerous thing, or something to be fearful, all of those things are really important. And then that's going to allow you, once you start thinking about, oh man, we can think about the world in totally different ways, we can start tackling some really tricky topics in this world that nobody wants to openly talk about, yet we really probably should talk about those things, like sex education, for example. It's a really tricky thing, and not lots of people want to talk about those things, but we probably should if we are going to spend the vast majority of our life trying to find a mate, trying to figure out how to mate, all of those kind of things. That's an important part of being a human being. It's an important part of being an animal of any sorts, or of anything that's living, and yet we exclude it because it's uncomfortable, or we don't go in that direction because it's a taboo topic. Or, for many of us, talking about death is a really tricky thing. It is, it's really tricky, and I don't like to talk about it. And yet death is as much as about life as life is, and we have to think about that. We're going to spend more of our time being dead in this world than we are going to be alive. And yet we should probably think about it and talk about these things and have open conversations. And how do we plan for when we actually die? Why not get a will? Why not actually have a conversation and like what's going to happen to our kids, or what's going to happen to everybody if I die? And I know it seems like a really unusual topic and kind of a morbid topic, but those are important things to talk about. And so that's where I want you to go, is learn that education, for the most part, is trying to get you to think in different ways. And there are topics, there's things that are uncomfortable, that people will touch upon. And most things are actually in education are going to be uncomfortable and difficult to talk about because they are going in different directions. We're having to think in different ways. And so we should, instead of thinking of them as something that's scary, that's a natural human response. That's what everybody goes through. including myself, is I get anxious, I get scared, I get angry, I get all of those emotions. But then I have to stop and think, and it might take a couple of years, and it takes me sometimes a couple of years to stop and think about things. You know what? This is actually probably something that we should address and talk about. And once we get to that moment, that's where things start clicking and you start seeing things a little bit broader. And you start actually understanding why that person was talking about it in that way. So I encourage you to try to think about education and what you're learning as ways to see the world differently. It's not to say that the world that you're seeing is right, however, it's a way to see it differently, and then maybe you're going to have a little bit more understanding when somebody brings up the thing that they're saying. So with that, give me a thumbs up, do subscribe to the YouTube channel, take care, and have a wonderful day. Bye.